What happens when centuries of royal protocol collide with a mother's desperate love? When the most disciplined soldiers in Britain are forced to choose between duty and conscience. This is the story of a single moment that shook the very foundations of the British royal family. A moment when a royal guard's boot crashed through a door, and nothing was ever the same again. Behind the golden gates of Windsor Castle, where every movement is choreographed and every breath is measured, a crisis was brewing that would test the limits of loyalty, family bonds, and the unbreakable rules that govern a monarchy. What started as whispered concerns in the corridors of power would soon explode into a situation so shocking, so unprecedented, that even the most seasoned royal insiders would be left speechless. This is not just another royal scandal. This is the untold story of Queen Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles, and the day his world came crashing down in the most dramatic way imaginable. A story of secrets that threatened to destroy everything. Of a family torn between love and duty. And of the moment when the most elite guards in the world had to make an impossible choice. Prepare yourself for a tale that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the royal family, because sometimes the most shocking truths are hidden behind the most beautiful facades. The morning mist hung heavy over Windsor Castle as Queen Camilla paced the length of her private study, her silk slippers making barely a whisper against the ancient Persian carpet. The ornate clock on the mantelpiece chimed 7 times, each sound echoing through the room like a funeral bell. She had been awake for hours, her mind churning with worry that had kept sleep at bay for the 3rd consecutive night. Through the tall windows, she could see the changing of the guard beginning in the courtyard below. The royal guards moved with their characteristic precision, their red uniforms pristine, their movements synchronized to perfection. But today, even this familiar sight brought her no comfort. Today, everything felt different, charged with an electricity that made her skin crawl with apprehension. Her phone buzzed against the mahogany desk, and her heart lurched. Another message from her son Tom's assistant, Sarah. The words were carefully chosen, diplomatically vague, but Camilla could read between the lines. Tom hadn't been seen for 3 days. His food delivery services had gone unclaimed. His neighbors reported strange sounds coming from his Belgravia flat, sounds that had grown increasingly concerning as the hours passed. Tom Parker Bowles had always been the steady one, the reliable son who managed his media career with the same quiet dignity his mother had learned to embody as queen consort. Unlike some royal family members who courted controversy, Tom preferred the shadows, content to build his reputation as a respected food critic and author without trading on his royal connections. This sudden silence was completely out of character, and that's what terrified Camilla most. She thought back to their last conversation, replaying every word, every pause, every subtle change in his voice. They had discussed his upcoming cookbook, his children, his work for various charities. Everything had seemed normal, perfectly ordinary. But now she wondered if she had missed something crucial. Some sign that her son was struggling with demons she couldn't see. The queen consort had survived public humiliation, media scandals, and the complex process of being accepted into the most scrutinized family in the world. She had weathered storms that would have destroyed lesser people. But this was different. This was her child, her firstborn. And the maternal instincts that no amount of royal protocol could suppress were screaming that something was terribly wrong. King Charles had left for Scotland that morning for a series of official engagements, unaware of the crisis brewing in his wife's heart. Camilla had considered telling him, but what could she say? That she had a feeling? That a mother's intuition was telling her to be worried? Charles had enough pressure on his shoulders as the newly crowned monarch. She couldn't burden him with what might turn out to be nothing more than her overactive imagination. But as she stared at her phone, watching the minutes tick by without any response to her increasingly frantic messages, she knew this wasn't imagination. This was real, and it was serious. Her private secretary, Margaret Thornton, knocked softly on the door before entering. Margaret had been with the royal household for over 2 decades and had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when delicate situations required careful handling. Her expression was neutral, but Camilla could see the concern in her eyes. "Your Majesty," Margaret said quietly, closing the door behind her, "I've spoken with Mr. Boardmere, Parker Bowles' building management. They've confirmed that no one has seen him entering or leaving his flat since Tuesday evening. The concierge mentioned that there was some kind of disturbance on Wednesday night, shouting, the sound of things being thrown. The police were called, but when they knocked, everything went quiet and there was no response." Camilla's hand went to her throat, where her pearls suddenly felt like they were choking her. "Did the police enter the flat?" "No, Your Majesty." Without clear evidence of immediate danger or a formal complaint, they couldn't force entry. They noted the incident and left their contact information with the building management. The Queen Consort sank into a chair, her mind racing through possibilities she didn't want to consider. Tom had been divorced for several years now, had struggled with the typical challenges of co-parenting, career pressures, and the unique stress of being connected to the royal family. But he had always been resilient, always found ways to cope with whatever life threw at him. "Margaret," she said finally, her voice steady despite the chaos in her heart, "I need you to contact Commander Williams immediately. Tell him I require a security assessment for my son's residence. Use whatever authorization is necessary, but I want our best people involved." Commander Williams headed the Royal Protection Unit, the elite team responsible for the safety of the royal family. He was a man of few words but decisive action, someone who understood that when royalty spoke of security concerns, time was often the most critical factor. Margaret nodded and moved toward the door, but Camilla called her back. "Margaret, this needs to be handled with absolute discretion. If the media gets wind of this before we know what we're dealing with, it could create complications for everyone involved, including Tom."
Of course, Your Majesty.
Commander Williams is already familiar with the protocols for sensitive family matters. After Margaret left, Camilla found herself alone again with her thoughts. She walked to the window and watched as tourists began gathering outside the castle gates, cameras ready, hoping for a glimpse of royalty. These people saw only the pageantry, the glamour, the fairy tale aspect of royal life. They couldn't see the human beings behind the titles, the parents who worried about their children just like anyone else. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. The caller ID showed Commander Williams's direct line, "Your Majesty." His voice was crisp, professional, but she could hear something underneath, a note of urgency that made her stomach drop. "I've dispatched a team to Mr. Charmer. Parker Bowles' address. We should have initial information within the hour." "Commander, I need to know, what exactly are your people authorized to do if the situation requires immediate intervention?" There was a pause before he answered. "Your Majesty, given the circumstances and your concerns for Mr. Spicer, Parker Bowles' welfare, we're prepared to take any necessary action to ensure his safety. We have protocols in place for these situations." Camilla closed her eyes, knowing that any necessary action was a polite way of saying they would break down the door if they had to. The thought of her son's privacy being violated in such a dramatic way made her feel sick, that the alternative, not knowing if he was safe, was infinitely worse. "Please proceed, Commander, and please, keep me informed of every development." "Of course, Your Majesty." As she hung up the phone, Camilla realized that she had just set in motion a series of events that could not be undone. Whatever was happening with Tom, whatever had driven him to this silence, was about to be discovered in the most dramatic way possible. She thought about calling Tom's sister Laura or his children, but decided against it until she knew more. There was no point in alarming the entire family. But even as she tried to rationalize her decision to wait, she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The Queen Consort returned to her pacing, her mind creating scenarios she desperately hoped were wrong. What if Tom had suffered some kind of medical emergency? What if he was lying unconscious in his flat while she wasted precious time worrying about protocol and privacy? What if her instincts were right and something truly terrible had happened? Outside, the morning was growing brighter, but inside Camilla's study, the shadows seemed to be deepening. She found herself praying to a God she wasn't always sure was listening, praying for her son's safety, praying that whatever the royal guards found when they reached his door would not be the nightmare she couldn't stop imagining. Time crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every minute felt like an hour, every hour like a day. Camilla tried to distract herself with official correspondence, with plans for upcoming engagements, with anything that might keep her mind occupied. But everything seemed trivial in the face of her growing fear for Tom's well-being. When her phone finally rang again, she snatched it up before the first ring had finished. "Your Majesty." Commander Williams's voice was different now, tense with urgency. "Our team has arrived at the location. They've confirmed that Mr. Parker Bowles is inside the residence, but he's not responding to any attempts at communication. We can hear movement but no verbal responses to our identification or requests for acknowledgement." Camilla's knuckles went white as she gripped the phone. "What does that mean exactly?"
Your Majesty, without being able to assess Mr. Parker Bowles' condition directly, we have to consider that he may be experiencing some form of medical emergency, psychological crisis, or other situation that's preventing normal communication.
Given the length of time since anyone has had contact with him, we're recommending immediate entry.
You're going to break down the door?
If necessary, yes, Your Majesty. We have a master key from building management, but if that doesn't work, we're prepared to use whatever means necessary to ensure Mr. Parker Bowles' safety. Camilla felt the room spinning around her. This was really happening. In a matter of minutes, her son's door would be opened by force, his privacy shattered, his personal space invaded by strangers in uniforms. But what choice did they have? What choice did she have? "Commander," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please proceed. But Commander, please be gentle with him. Whatever you find, whatever state he's in, please remember that he's my son." "Understood, Your Majesty. We'll be as careful as possible. I'll call you the moment we have information." As the line went dead, Camilla realized she was holding her breath. Somewhere across London, royal guards were preparing to kick open her son's door, and she had no idea what they would find on the other side. The Queen Consort had faced many challenges since joining the royal family, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The moment when maternal love collided with royal duty, when private family matters became matters of state security, and when a mother's worst fears were about to become reality. Sergeant Major David Morrison had served in the Royal Protection Unit for 12 years, had protected prime ministers, presidents, and members of the royal family in situations ranging from state dinners to war zones. He had trained for every conceivable scenario, had faced down terrorists and assassins with the same calm professionalism that defined his entire career. But as he stood outside Tom Parker Bowles' elegant Belgravia flat, keycard in hand, he felt his heart rate elevate in a way that had nothing to do with physical danger and everything to do with the unknown. Behind him, 3 other members of the protection unit waited in disciplined silence. They had been briefed on the situation. Possible medical emergency, family welfare check authorized at the highest levels, but briefings could never fully prepare you for the reality of what you might find behind a locked door. Morrison had seen enough in his military career to know that human beings were capable of both extraordinary resilience and shocking fragility, sometimes within the same person, sometimes within the same day. The hallway was elegantly appointed, with thick carpet that muffled their footsteps and artwork that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. This wasn't the kind of place where dramatic confrontations usually happened. This was a world of whispered conversations and carefully managed crises. But crisis had a way of finding people, regardless of their zip code or bank balance. Morrison pressed his ear to the heavy wooden door one final time. The sounds from within were subtle but troubling, shuffling footsteps that seemed to have no purpose, the occasional thud, as if something had been dropped or knocked over. And underneath it all, a low murmuring that might have been conversation, or might have been something else entirely.
Mr.
"Parker Bowles," he called through the door, his voice carrying the authority that came with his position. "This is Sergeant Major Morrison with the Royal Protection Unit. We're here at the request of Her Majesty Queen Camilla to conduct a welfare check. Sir, we need verbal confirmation that you're safe and well." The sounds inside stopped abruptly, as if whoever was in there was holding their breath. Morrison waited 30 seconds, then tried again. "Sir, we're going to need some form of acknowledgement. If you're unable to come to the door, please call out so we know you can hear us." More silence, heavy and oppressive. Morrison looked back at his team and received subtle nods. They all understood what came next. He slid the keycard into the electronic lock, but the red light that appeared told him what he had expected. The door had been secured from the inside with a manual deadbolt. "Right then," Morrison muttered under his breath. He stepped back and gestured for Officer Sarah Chen to bring forward the portable door ram they called the Big Key. It was designed to breach doors with minimum noise and maximum efficiency, though in a building like this, minimum noise was a relative concept. Morrison's radio crackled softly. Commander Williams's voice was carefully controlled. "Morrison, status report. Sir, we've confirmed unresponsive occupant. Electronic key ineffective due to manual security measures. Preparing to implement immediate entry protocols. Understood, proceed with caution. Remember, this is a family member, not a security threat." "Copy that, sir." Morrison positioned himself to the side of the doorframe and signaled to Chen. The ram was designed to strike just below the lock mechanism, where the door was typically weakest. In her hands, it looked almost delicate, but Morrison knew it could punch through solid oak like it was cardboard. "On 3, he whispered. 1, 2, 3. The impact was tremendous, the sound echoing through the hallway like a gunshot. The door flew open with such force that it slammed into the wall behind it. leaving a dent in the expensive wallpaper. Morrison was through the doorway before the echo had faded, his trained eyes scanning the entrance hall for threats, for signs of what they were dealing with.
What he saw made him stop dead in his tracks.
The flat was in chaos, but it was a very specific kind of chaos. This wasn't the random destruction of a burglary, or the messy accumulation of someone who had stopped caring about their surroundings. This was the methodical dismantling of a life by someone who was looking for something, or trying to destroy something, or perhaps both. Bookshelves had been emptied, their contents scattered across the hardwood floor in careful piles. Kitchen cabinets stood open, their contents arranged on counters with an almost obsessive organization. File cabinets had been emptied, papers sorted into stacks that seemed to follow some internal logic that only made sense to whoever had created them. "Mr. Parker Bowles?" Morrison called out, his voice echoing strangely in the disrupted space. "Sir, we're here to help. Please identify yourself." The sound came from deeper in the flat, from what Morrison assumed was the master bedroom. It was barely human, a keening wail that started low and built to a crescendo before breaking off abruptly, as if someone had suddenly become aware they were making noise. Morrison gestured for his team to spread out, to secure the other rooms while he approached the source of the sound. His training told him to treat this as a potential threat situation, but his instincts told him something different. This wasn't danger in the traditional sense. This was something much more complex and infinitely more fragile. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, Morrison could see more organized chaos. Clothes had been removed from closets and arranged by color and season. Personal items, photographs, awards, mementos, had been lined up on the dresser with mathematical precision. And in the center of it all, sitting cross-legged on the floor surrounded by what appeared to be years' worth of personal documents, was Tom Parker Bowles. Morrison had seen photographs of the Queen Consort's son, of course. Official portraits, candid shots from charity events, the occasional paparazzi picture that made it into the tabloids. But the man on the floor bore little resemblance to those images. His hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled and stained. His eyes were red-rimmed and had the glazed look of someone who hadn't slept in days. Most striking of all were his hands, which moved constantly, sorting and resorting papers with a manic energy that suggested he had been at this task for hours, possibly days. "Mr. Parker Bowles," Morrison said softly, stepping carefully into the room. "Sir, I'm Sergeant Major Morrison. Your mother sent us to check on you." Tom's hand stopped moving for a moment, and he looked up with eyes that seemed to be having trouble focusing. "Mother?" he said, his voice hoarse from lack of use. "She shouldn't have. I told her I needed time. I told everyone I needed time." Morrison crouched down slowly, keeping his movements non-threatening, the way he had been trained to approach trauma victims and people in psychological distress.
"Sir, people have been worried."
"You haven't been answering your phone, and your neighbors reported some concerning sounds." Tom laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Concerning sounds. Yes. I suppose dismantling your entire life might be concerning to people who don't understand the necessity of it." Morrison's radio crackled again, but he ignored it. His full attention was focused on the man in front of him, on trying to understand what had driven the Queen Consort's son to this state. Around them, the evidence of Tom's crisis was overwhelming. Bank statements, legal documents, personal letters, photographs, all sorted into piles that seemed to follow some pattern only Tom could understand. "Sir, could you tell me what you're looking for? Maybe we can help you find it." Tom's eyes snapped back into focus, and for a moment Morrison saw a flash of the intelligent, accomplished man he was supposed to be. "Looking for?" "I'm not looking for anything. I'm organizing."